Welcome to the podcast Blind Faith, a podcast sort of exploring blindness and faith and how they interact. My name is Mark Madavan. It's my privilege to be the host of this podcast brought to us by Torch Trust for the Blind. In each episode, I'm going to be chatting to someone who is blind or has some relationship with blindness and just exploring how faith works. So let's dive straight in and introduce this episode's guest. It's Anne Phipps. Really warm welcome to you, Anne.
Thanks so much. It's lovely to be here.
And thanks this time. So let's dive straight in. What's your journey with blindness, and how do you encounter blindness?
So I have a disease of the macular, a genetic disease, which people have known all my life that I have. And in the last 10 years, it's meant that I've lost my central vision. So I have what for me is like a really interesting kind of partial sightedness, which I think a lot of people don't really understand, which is if I look at something, it disappears, but I can see all the things around the outside. So it's incredibly hard to explain to someone, but kind of quite interesting to live with.
Because those, I mean, I'm blind as well, and having that partial sight and seeing something and then not seeing something is, if you're blind, you sort of get it, but those who don't know it are just think, are you pretending?
Yes, I do feel that sometimes. I worry that people, because out of the corner of my eye, I'll suddenly be like, oh, it's a blue tit, and I'll be able to see that, but then I can't read a menu or I can't see someone coming towards me on the street. So, and it's incredibly difficult for people to understand that I can't just make it right with glasses. Like the number of people who say, "Oh, have you tried glasses?" Yes, I have tried glasses. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. I mean, I use a stick because I can't navigate well, but then I can read my mobile phone really close up to my nose, and people are going, "Wait, it just doesn't make sense."
Yeah.
So you said this is in the last 10 years, it's sort of coming a bit more tricky.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah, I stopped driving. 10 years ago now, and stopped being able to read kind of normal books about 10 years ago. That was when I'd say that I really started feeling the effects of it.
And how, so it's obviously reading and driving are nuisances for our mobility and things like that.
Yeah.
Have you found other places that blindness has surprised you or stretched you?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it is around social embarrassment that I just didn't realize I was going to feel, which is as people are, because you can't tell that I have a sight problem, as people approach me, someone might wave like, I can't see what's going on with their face. And you just don't realize how much of your interaction with other people is based on what's going on with their faces, all that kind of little, just those little expressions. And I do find that quite difficult, that people might think I'm being rude, or that I'm behaving oddly because I'm staring at them for a long time, or I'm trying to look at them slightly out of the side of my eye, which I do try and do sometimes. And I realised that socially that can be quite odd. That was definitely one thing. And I think also that's kind of surprised me and stretched me is just the small irritations of losing your sight. So I think when I was young, oddly, you think there's a kind of weirdly a romance of blindness. There's this big kind of dramatic trauma that it is, this kind of huge thing. And actually for me, with my kind of sight loss, which is obviously very different from some other people's, it's just been a constant, drag of incremental boring irritations.
So blindness is boring, basically. Because I totally get that. Is you're not sort of coping with, I've got it sorted, because tomorrow it may be a little bit different, although it's similar, and it just goes day on day. And
I think that's right. So recently I walked up Sugarloaf Mountain with my family, and I've always loved hill walking. Absolutely fantastic. It was beautiful. I can still see panoramas, so I'm incredibly lucky. I really, really feel that with my sight loss. But then we were coming down, and I realised for the first time that I can't really walk down hills like that anymore, because I can't. Where I look, I can't see my feet. And so I can't, when I'm relaxed and looking ahead, I can work out what's going on with my feet. But when I really need to go down rocky terrain, I can't see that. And that was, again, another disappointment. I was like, oh, come on, another small loss, another little thing that's gone.
So are you saying that you just discovered that new limitation that you can't see your feet going down, as in quite recently you just discovered that?
Yes. And I think it might have been, you can never tell when actually that sight loss happened. It was because I haven't been down a large mountain for a while. So it could have been a long while that I had that limitation. And also I think my recent walking, I've had someone very close to me there, and so maybe I didn't feel it so much. Whereas suddenly, with all of the kids kind of running ahead, I suddenly thought, "Oh gosh, am I going to have to go down on my bum?" Suddenly I can't actually walk this place. So yeah, who knows how long that limitation has been there? But it was just in that moment I thought, "Ah,
So
here we go."
I'm fascinated with this in that because you suddenly discover something you can't see, and
Yeah.
then in that moment, because you can't say, oh, I'll think about that over the next couple of weeks, as in
Yes.
I'm walking down the mountain now. I need to learn now.
Yes.
And because I think often people think is it's all downloaded, you know how to sort it out,
Yeah.
or you're waiting for that download when to how to cope with that. And actually, a lot of it is it's live learning.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think what I have realized with my sight loss is that my brain compensates hugely for a really long time. And so it's almost like it's helping me see things that I'm not actually seeing with my eyes. My brain's making up the picture. And then suddenly there's not quite enough information. And then I can't see it. And it's a sudden noticing, even though that limitation has probably been there for a while, my brain has only just gone, okay, this is too little information now. You can't see this anymore.
And
Yeah.
would you have found it, or have you found it helpful chatting to someone about it? As in, because I know Torch Trust, they have a sort of support line, and they just someone to talk through a little bit to help you through some of these sort of new discoveries. Would that be chatting to someone? Would that be helpful?
It absolutely would be helpful, and I feel really fortunate that I've met with you before, Mark, and discussed some of the kind of the confidence issues that sight loss has caused for me. And I think it's so interesting, isn't it? Whereas with any issue you have in your life, you're not only managing it for yourself, but you're managing it for the people around you. And I always want to make sure that everyone knows that I'm okay. So you're constantly saying, it's fine. I can still see this. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And actually, to talk to someone and go, actually, this is not fine would be
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing. I know Torch Trust are trying to get a chaplain to help people as well, and can signpost, which is
It'd be
brilliant.
amazing.
Interesting you say, you're telling everyone you're fine. And often I think, I know my experience, I'm not sure if it's yours, is that you're often living in a way to help people. You're helping them with your blindness,
Yes.
even though they're often saying, how can we help you? And you're not really sure, but you're sort of managing your life to help them.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think it's difficult as well to know how much to talk about it. I think it's with anything when you're living with a condition, you're thinking, this is part of my experience all the time. And not everyone else is aware of that. How often do you bring it up? And I worry sometimes that I raise it too often. And then I think, and then I realize that some people in my life aren't even aware of it at all. So it's kind of difficult to navigate how much you express to people about what's going on. And also, again, for me, because sometimes I can do so much and then other times not, it feels that you do have that worry of, do people think I'm making this up? Um, yeah, so managing it for other people is a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, that's and again, it's always helpful to chat with people who get it a little bit
Yeah,
more, and other blind folks. So
yeah.
different organizations are brilliant. How does I said about it's blind faith, and how does faith fit into this? So, faith in God and where God is in that, and how does that fit into any of your thinking?
Yeah, so I think it's probably helpful just to say where I've kind of come from in my faith. So I became a Christian when I was 15 and would had that experience that I'd say became an evangelical Christian at that point. And then for the next 20 years of my life, really kind of inhabited that fully and was very kind of yeah, loved God and loved living that life as a Christian. I went really kind of full in on it. And then I'd say kind of 10, 12 years ago, around when my daughter was born, actually. And actually, interestingly, while I was thinking about this, around when my first sight loss really happened, I had a real shift in my relationship with my faith and had a period of, I mean, years, maybe like 5, 6 years, where I just felt nothing. It was, I really kept on going, trying to go to church and had such dryness and really just stepped away from it completely and had a real sense of relief at stepping away actually and going, this is not for me at this point. And what's happened in the last kind of 5 years, I guess, is coming to a point of real comfort and peace around not knowing. So saying this is something that's in my life, and I'm part of a faith community in Bath where I live, but being much more comfortable with not having the black and white certainties that I used to have, and that actually not knowing and being humble in that is okay and a legitimate way to express your faith. And I think in terms of my sight loss, it fits really well with that for me. This kind of not knowing, this space of, yeah, of lack of certainty. It it's kind of it's helpful to be able to hold that, I think.
That's really interesting because I think about that whole lack of certainty is a comfort.
Mm.
Because I think sometimes with faith, I passionately believe that Jesus is the one who changed, which I'm sure you'd probably say, well, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But how you express that and how you explore that, and how often churches say this is what you've got to do, can sometimes it's like with blindness. Well, this is how you have to deal with it, and it's exploring. Well, how does that work? And sometimes you're going, do you know? Maybe there's a different way of expressing it, or maybe there's a different way of connecting with it.
Yeah, I feel that as a young person, I really wanted to conform to what I thought the church expected of me, and also conform to all the ideas that I was taught. Of course, trusting other people, and actually now not having to conform in that way, and recognizing that that's a completely legitimate way of expressing your faith. That you don't have to say certain words, you don't have to, express your faith in exactly the same way as other people. It's completely legitimate, and I think in terms of it is a real learning with sight loss as well that my experience of what I see is completely legitimate. So I see color slightly differently from other people. So my when I say the word green, I'm saying something slightly different actually to what you say when you say the word green. And that's the same with faith. When I say the word God, I am expressing something slightly different in my own head about what I think God, who I think God is, exactly as you were, because you have that own image within your own mind.
Because it's not saying, "Oh, it's vague and doesn't exist." It because, you and I exist right now in this room, and we have similarities with blindness,
Mm.
but they're different, and we can learn from each other, but it doesn't necessarily define us. And I think with our relationship with God as well, I mean, there are some truths of God, but actually how you work out that relationship, how you understand that, and how you experience that there are it's like every relationship, there are seasons and it changes, and I'm just fascinated that you're going. Actually, I'm finding comfort in that blurriness because I think some people are the other way around, as in I want certainty.
Yes, and I have always wanted certainty. It's so interesting. When I was living in London, I started going to Quaker meeting and found it incredibly helpful to be among people who have such humility about what we don't understand. And for me, that was really helpful. That it wasn't in order to have faith, I didn't have to have certainty. And that was a relief to me because I'd never been certain. I'd always wrestled with God, I'd always wrestled with the Bible and what I was told. And to be able to rest in uncertainty has been fantastic for me.
I think that's amazing. I'm a pastor, so I preach, and sometimes when we do some of the big issues in life and stuff, is I'm going, okay, here's the real fundamental answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
And I have so many people give feedback to that, and they're going, "Oh, thank you," because we're expecting you to know everything, or there must be an answer to everything. And the truth is, how do you cope with your blindness? Is, well, I don't know, but I can give you some good signposts, some handholds, and let's work that out together.
Yeah.
And I think with faith as well, there are some certainties in that, but how that works out, and with blindness in the mix of that as well, is again, I don't think there's a perfect download to come in. Oh, that's how it all works. But I think it's great that you're still exploring. You're still wanting, in that uncertainty, there's comfort in that, but there is some, I'm guessing there's still truths in there, but you're just trying to work out how they connect up.
Yeah, and also I think as you're talking about being supported in with blindness and with faith, is that I think the community has been a hugely important thing in that. And for me, the community and how we support each other as a community has become more and more important. I think I was much more individualistic as a young person and really kind of ploughing my own furrow and really confident in that in lots of ways. And this kind of breaking down of certainties actually has a benefit in that if I've been forced to depend on other people, like, this whole thing of getting lifts all the time, how frustrating I found that to begin with. And actually, that recognition that taking a lift from someone is a gift to them as well as a connection between two people that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
That's I think that's really powerful, and I think in a faith community as well, because I know church trusts are trying to get some resources to help churches do that better. Because the truth is, most people don't know how to help blind people, and if you get a little some, if they can help them and encourage them a little bit more, it can be a real blessing. And in the communities I've been involved with, and it sounds like yours as well, is there is richness. I mean, people do say stupid things along the way. but there's also some really beautiful things that people do and say.
Yeah, definitely.
So right now, if you were to able to go back in time and say your late teen or early 20 self, and you could give yourself some advice and saying, Anne, you need to know this. What what would that be? What information would you give? What detail would you give to yourself?
That's such a difficult question, isn't it? I'm not sure my teenage self would have listened to me, which is one of the problems. I'm so sure of everything. Um, I think it is that the things that you're certain of, your views, your things change, and that life is much more. I mean, it's a cliche, isn't it? Life is much more complicated, difficult, and beautiful and messy than you could ever imagine when you're a teenager. You think there's some kind of linear path from A to B, and actually, it's just not. There's lots of circles and cul-de-sacs. I think as well with I suppose relating particularly to blindness. I think I did have a particular picture in my head of what this was gonna look like. I'd been told that I would lose my central vision at some unknown point in the future, and I don't know what that picture was now, but I was very clear about what that would be, and it's been so different and so much kind of richer, and one of the things that I think I would say to my younger self is that the things that you think are losses can actually be gains, that everything that when you lose something, there's something that balances it out. So as we've spoken about, having to accept lifts from people, having to accept help, there have been relationship gains in that. Or, I'm completely obsessed with climate change, like a lot of people. The fact that I have to take public transport all the time, I have to walk everywhere. I've had to build my life around, a kind of low carbon way of living. That's great. I can model that to other people that your life is possible without having to be in the car all the time. Um,
That's amazing because when you said that a loss can actually still be a gain, I was thinking, "Oh, what if she unpacks that?" And you did, and I
yeah,
think reflection on those because there is, I mean, blindness is a pain. It is a nuisance, and there's a lot of frustrations. But actually, it's that richer and that circles within circles and impact on other people. And I think in a faith community as well, and with God and Jesus in the midst of that, is it can stretch and you can see things. One of the things that I often say is there's a verse in Isaiah talking about you see the treasures in the dark places, and which is a really weird verse. But if you want to go and see a sky full of stars, which I know you can't anymore and I can't, but for normal people, for them to see stars, it's got to be dark. And often
yes,
you can
that's right.
only see the beauty of some things when you have the darkness around. And I think sometimes that we do get to see some things that other people don't.
Yes,
I'm not going, "Yay," but I'm actually going, "Oh, wow, I do see things."
yeah, and also I think that kind of the finite nature of our sight. Our sight, both of our sight is deteriorating, and it does make it very precious. When at the moment, I mean, I have to say my sight loss is nowhere near a huge number of other people. So I can speak about irritation rather than tragedy because I have a lot of sight left. So I kind of have to caveat what I'm saying in some ways. But I do think that living with a loss and a future loss means that you do appreciate things in a different way. Things have a different savor to them. Um,
Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing and for being honest. It's just been a fascinating conversation. And thank you for joining us on this podcast of Blind Faith. And I hope you join us for a future episode.
If you are living with sight loss or support someone who is, then Torch is here for you. Get in touch at torchtrust.org.